Today, we were excited to share with you one of the cornerstones of our approach at the Freedom Way. And we call this approach the Trilogy of Connection. This is a unique framework, really at the heart of equine assisted coach training program. And it creates a really powerful dynamic. And it's a way to describe the dynamic that happens in a session between the coach, the horse, and the client. It's something that really fosters dynamic healing and growth. And what I would also call organic. It's not forced, it's not scripted. Through the trilogy of connection, it's all very natural. It all flows in the order that it is meant to flow. And it creates a beautiful space that holds unlimited possibility. The trilogy of connection, like I mentioned, is more than just a methodology. It's a philosophy that guides every aspect of our coaching practice. At its very core, it brings together and connects the essential elements. And I just mentioned those. That's the client, the horse, and the coach. And by nurturing and honoring that relationship, we create a space where really profound things happen.
It does, and it in between that trilogy, that triangle, sort of say it, the trust that develops between the client and the horse, the client and the coach and the horse, right? It becomes powerful, and it almost creates a sacred container. So you can call it a container.
It's a great word for it. Yeah, yeah.
It's a sacred space, a sacred container to hold everything that's going to hold during the session.
Absolutely. And this is kind of where the magic happens, because when you move into that space of connection and trust, where everyone is present and feeling and open, and sometimes it's vulnerable too, but it's a very safe space, that's when breakthroughs happen.
It's almost like a dance.
It is like very much like a dance. And you'll hear us say the word magic. Magic is not a very scientific word at all, but sometimes that's the best word to describe what happens in that space. Within this space, you create a lot of harmony. And one of the most important things that happens for the client is they feel seen, they feel heard, and they feel understood in ways that maybe they've never experienced before. And the amazing part of a lot of this is that sometimes this happens without a word even being spoken. You know, this is where we pull in the sentience of the horse, their awareness, the emotions, their presence within that, and the feeling and the understanding that they have, their ability to reciprocate and give back to the client that way. It's really beautiful when a client feels for the first time, maybe ever, maybe it's been a while, that somebody really sees them for who they are.
And sometimes even it's the first time they've been able to feel their emotions.
That trilogy of connection happens, it creates a safety net. I mentioned the word vulnerable a little while ago. And vulnerability is that space of healing, and it is that space of power, and it's where we learn and we grow and evolve. And when we feel safe enough to do that, with a horse who doesn't speak English, and receive from them, while the coach also helps hold this space and guide the session for the client. Like we said, it's that dance and the magic happens. That's when things really begin to shift and change in really powerful ways. Talk therapy is good, whether it's talk therapy, talk coaching, whatever that's really good, and it's helped a lot of people. I like to talk things out from time to time, right? But through the trilogy of connection, you take that to a much deeper place.
We can't heal if we don't feel safe. And sometimes it's very hard for a person to find that level of safety.
Absolutely. And so we spend a lot of time in the Freedom Way equine assisted coach training programs bringing awareness to this trilogy. And while it is a philosophical approach, there are also some very practical steps that you take to create this. And so our students become masters of this. They really truly learn how to, even effortlessly might be a word to throw in here, create that connection so that you create the safety. So the client is seen and heard and felt and experienced. Because when you're, like Janice was mentioning, when you're in that space of safety, then you can begin to change. This is where self-discovery really flourishes. And that's a key part of the coaching world, is that self-discovery piece, helping the client step into that.
Yes.
I remember a really beautiful story with a gal who was going through a divorce. And she just felt like things were not going well. She wasn't being seen, she wasn't being heard, she wasn't being acknowledged or respected, and some of those other things that were kind of wrapped up into her world. And so she went into the stall with one of my horses, Princess. And the reason for being in the stall was to help her become aware of when she kind of felt like she'd hit her boundary or something was crossing her boundary and so forth. So she was instructed when she went in the stall to take 3 steps. And if she was comfortable, to go ahead and take another 3 steps. If she, at any point during the session she was to feel uncomfortable, the instructions were for her to stop and let me know. So she goes in, and she's been so looking forward to this session with the horse. And Princess is a beautiful horse anyway, and everybody loved to spend time with her. So she got in the stall, and she just couldn't wait to get close to the horse. So she took 3 steps, and then another 3 steps, and just kind of picked up the pace getting towards the horse. And she reached out, and Princess reached out, and they connected, and they were interacting. Observing this connection, though, in this space, I began to notice the Princess was pushing her around a little bit. It was a little lean here and a little nudge here, a move of a foot here. And sometimes my client was having to quickly move her feet or catch her balance or step out of the way. And again, it was very gentle, but it was happening. There were even times where the client got between the horse and the panel, the fence. And I this went on for quite a bit. And, ended this portion of the session. I invited the client to come over and tell me what she experienced. She came over with this really big grin on her face, like, oh, that was amazing. I felt this really great connection with Princess, and I felt like she loved me and I loved her, and everything, everything was just as good as she could imagine. And I said, that is really amazing. Can I share a different perspective? She says, yeah, absolutely. So I shared what I had observed about Princess nudging her and moving it around. And I said, I noticed a couple times you had to kind of catch your balance or move your feet really quickly to avoid being stepped on. And I said, did that concern you at all? She says, well, yeah, it did. And I said, well, remember, you were supposed to let me know. And she's like, oh, I didn't want to interrupt the flow. And so I talked about, at one point, she was kind of pinned in the corner. And, the horse was absolutely loving on her and Princess was getting all the attention she wanted and how she wanted it. And I said, what about when you were in the corner? Was that comfortable? Was it uncomfortable? Tell me what was going on. She says, oh, I was really kind of getting concerned. And again, I asked, why didn't you speak up? And she said, well, I didn't want to interrupt anything because she was being so nice to me. And I felt like if I stopped that or pushed back or, whatever, that would break that. And so we continued in the discussion, and the client of her own accord quickly realized that when people softly pushed her boundaries, were nice about stepping on her toes, or were nice about knocking her over, because it was the attention that she really wanted, she didn't want to say anything. And so we talked about the difference between soft boundaries and harsh boundaries. If somebody came up and slugged her in the shoulder, she would have had no problem getting a little upset about that. But it was those soft boundaries. So we had some discussion about how she could set those boundaries with Princess and see what happened. So she went back in and we repeated the exact same exercise, but this time she began to, if the horse leaned into her, she moved her back. If the horse started to move her, over into the corner or an area she didn't want to be, she gently moved her back. And what she came to realize is that the connection changed.
Mhm.
That Princess wasn't any less connected. In fact, she was a lot more connected because instead of Princess just getting her way throughout the whole thing, she was also listening to the desires of the client and the client's need to feel safe within that. And so after that portion of the session, again, the client came out with this really big grin on her face. She's just like, that was so powerful. It was so amazing. I was able, she says, I had no idea that that could happen if I were to set a boundary. She says, I figured there'd be a big fight, the whole world would fall apart, it would be all my fault, and she says things would escalate in the wrong direction. I think that really describes that trilogy of connection.
Absolutely.
How beautifully all three of us were connected into that space. Again, the horse did most of the work. I was there as the coach to coach her throughout the process, but also offer some different perspectives that she was not aware of and how that all began to change. And it was through her connection with the horse, experiencing that connection in two different ways, she really became empowered and took a lot of her power back that she had been letting go.
I always love hearing that story. And one of the beautiful things about the equine-assisted coaching versus talk therapy or something else is it is experiential, right? So now she can take what she learned because she knows how it feels.
Mhm.
She knows how it feels to set up some boundaries and not. We hate boundaries because we think it's going to scare people away.
Right.
Right. We all do. But now she got to experience how it works. So she can take that and use that right now.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because she knows that she's going to have the same effects. And that's the beauty when you go through this experience through this connection
Mhm.
is you're ready to take it out and apply it. It's not just talking about it and I'm going to go home and I'm going to try it. It's,
Right.
I've already done it and I know it works. So now I can use it.
Mhm.
There's a big difference there.
There is. And this connection that is created within the three or more, because a session could also have more than one person in it, but that trilogy of connection that happens in there really allows us to come in full force. And so that's why this is really a cornerstone of what we teach in our training programs, is to gain that full potential that exists within that space, be able to harness that, if you will, use a horse word there, harness that by bringing the client, the horse, and the coach together in a really beautiful dance of connection that creates safety, which ultimately leads to transformation.
Sure does.